Hello Wargamers, it's me Callum from Tabletop Banter, and in today's video we're going to talk a little bit about the philosophy of playing a fluffy army. Okay, so the reason I wanted to bring up this video was because relatively recently there have been some discussions between me and friends about, playing games and stuff, and what kind of armies you bring and what kind of lists you want to take, and there's that constant online debate on people who play to win, people who play because they like a challenge, or people who play because those are the models they have in their collection and they like the look of the models. And what I want to talk about today is playing with a fluffy army. And a couple of the issues you'll face, but a couple of the things that you'll face which make those issues not important. So first of all, what is a fluffy army? Well, a fluffy army is something that fits the story. For example, if you went out and built an Imperial Fist army, and pretty much everything had bolt guns, heavy bolters, that kind of theme. You had Lysander and a few Terminators inside the bolter-ridden Hurricane Bolter Land Raider. You had Devastators by the bucket load. You had tacticals everywhere, just 10-man tacticals. Heavy bolter as a special weapon, as the heavy weapon, and then maybe a flamer or something less, maybe not so plasma-y. And you had just squads like that, or bolters in every occasion. Then you're taking a fluffy Imperial Fist army. You are forgetting about every other thing apart from what makes the Imperial Fist the Imperial Fists. Okay, the thing they like most: bolters and devastators. If you were playing Iron Hands, you'd have vehicles, dreadnoughts, you'd have tech marines, and things like that would all combine. If you're playing Raven Guard, you're going scouts, no tactical marines, you're going all jump packs where you can. This fast, hard-hitting army. So those are fluffy Space Marine lists. Obviously there's fluffy elsewhere, but that's a good example. So this is a fluffy list, something that you base solely on the story. That is not the same as claiming to be fluffy whilst going competitive. So there are builds in 40k now with the Battle Demi Company which are hyper competitive, and people will say, well, it's fluffy. Well, yes, it is, in the respect that most chapters have a demi company at their disposal, but it is not fluffy in the fact that you built this army from a story. You weren't inspired by fluff, you were inspired by winning. Not that that's a bad thing, just saying it's a different thing. So let's just assume you've built this fluffy army, and I don't know, you built it because you like the story. Is it likely to be competitive? Probably not, because things that are hyper competitive maximize, basically they play on the stress points of games. Stress points of games are not normally keyed up to fit in with the fluff. For example, 2 10-man tactical squads take up 2 troop choices, and you can have a captain. Excuse me, there was a fly. Now that's pretty fluffy in some respects, but 2 5-man scout squads, mastery level 1 librarian, and then spending all the rest on some kind of killy Death Star unit, not fluffy. So you're not focusing on the stress points of the game, which means you're not maximizing your chances of winning. But you've made the conscious decision to build your list because of the story, so therefore, is winning likely to be your optimum objective? Possibly not. Possibly more, you want to play to a story. You want to play so that the things that are happening on the table represent how they are in the book you've read, or the book you're writing, or if you've listened to an audio tape, or if you've seen a few pictures. Okay, that's what a fluffy army is, something that's inspired by that. So winning may not be the top of the list. Obviously, everyone likes to do the best they can, and that does involve winning, obviously. But is that a number one objective? Possibly not. That's all I'm trying to say here. So I personally build most of my armies because of something I read, because of something I see, or because of something I'd like to write. Let us take, for example, my first ever army, my Space Marine chapter. I've written a story, though I'm building them out so that they're scouts. They're expensive units that are generally pretty crap. I mean, my librarian, he could have stopped at like 100 odd points and been good. I made him 175. He's pretty useless because he can still be one-shotted. He can still, die just like that. And that's a shame. And there's no way of adding extra wounds onto him or anything. He's a 2-wound character for 175 points. It's stupidly expensive. But do I care? No, because he's fit in this story I've written. He's fit in this feel of the army that I'm going for. So I'm not looking to win games with these guys. Correction, sorry. The sole purpose of playing my game is not winning. While I want to win, while I will try to win, I want to see my models represent what I want them to represent on the table. I want my scouts to be in cover, you know, taking heavy fire, dishing out fire. I want my land speeder stormers to be scooting between the two, dropping off, picking up. I want my tacticals to be very stern wall, like just stood there with bolt guns on an objective and not moving. I want my vindicators to be blowing holes in the sides of everything. I want my honor guard and my land raider and my captain to ride right up to the middle of the board, right in your face, hop out and try and hack through as much as they can before they die. That's what I want from the game. If that happens, I'm happy if I win or if I lose. So as a fluffy player, if you are like me, you will find that whilst the majority of the time you won't win, if you can create these scenarios, create these cool ways of playing, which involve more than just the end result, and they're more about the journey and the narrative. If you can find a narrative to every game, that's great. Here are a few aids from me to help you sort of really make those games more immersive, make those games more what you want them to be. Anyone can walk down to a shop and go play a game with someone. Now, pickup games are fun, they're not often led by a narrative. So you'd have to really inject the narrative yourself. That obviously has to be done up here because the person you're playing against might not give, you know, a hoot. I'll try and keep it clean. A hoot about anything fluff related, and their models are unpainted and everything, and that could be quite hard for you as a fluffy. It's hard for me as a fluffy gamer to go and play against someone who shows no love and care in the story in which they have invested their money in. In the same way that if someone wants a competitive game and they ask me for it, I say, I'm not that competitive, you'll just crush me. Because, you know, they want something, I want something, and they might not match up. So a lot of the narrative will have to come from your enjoyment. You set yourself goals in the game that are not necessarily objective related, but there's something. So you're like, okay, I want my captain to charge their HQ choice. He might die, he might not make it, but that's what I want. So that's what I want story-wise. So that's what I'm going to play to. The other thing that's really important is having this wonderful scenario. So the terrain makes a huge difference. Competitive gamers may complain about too much or too little terrain. In my opinion, if it looks real, that's better. So you just chuck on the terrain. You say buildings everywhere. I want, you know, instead of having the board say building on, we get 2 buildings each. You know, there's some trees in the middle that we can both get to. Forget that. Screw balance. Okay, you say this half of the table, okay, which normally works best in long ways, is all going to be a city. It's going to go out into this kind of like urban-rural combination, and then at the end of the table we're going to have a forest. Because having stuff like that, that paints a picture. That gives you that opportunity to invest in the story, to invest in the situation, to say, oh, how cool is this? You know, I'm storming a relic, a ruin, or, you know, or if you're playing a mission, like even objective counters, just the mission, the relic. If you make a relic, that can be so much cooler because you're chasing for this one thing. So you try and make the game as immersive as possible. Now that really only helps if your opponent's painted his minis, and if he hasn't, then again your imagination's going to really have to kick in there. But if you can find an opponent who's painted his army and you've got a table that looks really cool, then you are going to find those games 100 times better than just going and playing a pickup game with books for terrain. So that's obviously one big tip there. Make the story, make the game immersive, and you'll like it that much more. Second is realize that though you might not win every game, there is no harm in playing to win with what you have. So you don't have to resign yourself to defeat every time you take the table. I've played against a couple of competitive players and been stomped, but at the same time, I played one game is quite memorable to me because he played a super cheesy Raider spam Dark Eldar list against a foot-slogging Space Marine list. I had no vehicles. I had one Rhino, which he took out with a Ravager, and that's obvious. Okay, I had nothing else. He just had Ravagers, Razor Wings, and Raiders. He had so many Cabalites. He had the Archon Incubi Death Star kind of thing going on. It was brutal, it was horrible, and the list was savage. How did I counter that list? I decided that I would try and play for the objectives. So obviously it's not all about killing, and my guys were slow and mobile, so that was even worse for objectives. So I accumulated as many objectives as possible in the first 4 turns of the game, and then it was a case of denying and surviving. It worked. I pulled off a draw, which was pretty impressive given the fact that I had just tactical marines, a couple of terminators, and some Militarum Tempestus Scions. We were playing 1500 points, and I was really like maxing out upgrades on characters. It was kind of ridiculous actually. So how did I didn't win, obviously, but I still played to the best of my ability, and I did so in a way that was, it made the best of what I did have. So I had these bodies, so I sat on objectives, and I tried to accumulate as many points as I could. There came a point when I just had, left on the table, last thing, was for the last 2 turns, I had 5 Terminators and a few Tempestus Scions. That's all I had left. This guy had 3 Raiders full, 1 broken with a few on foot, a few Incubi on foot, an Archon on foot, 3 Ravengers, and that was it. So I was up against, and the Razor Wings, but then they couldn't really hurt what I was playing because they had to fly, and I kept all my stuff in his deployment zone. So anyway, I digress. I was playing this way of trying to hold out for a win. So I literally, everything hid. So all of a sudden, everything was going to ground, everything was hiding, and I was having fun because in my mind, the story was going, it's a last stand. I'm still playing for the objectives, I'm still playing to try and succeed, but I'm going about it in my own way. So it was very much like, oh my god, I've got 3 guys alive. If they can just find cover, if they can go to ground, or if they can hide from every unit that can fire at them, I'll draw the game. And it ended up being a tie because I had Linebreaker with 1 unit, and that was it. That was the only thing that kept me in it. It was my 5-man Tempestus Scion squad, which became 2-man. They passed leadership. They got me Linebreaker. And that was really memorable for me because although I came in with a fluffy, uncompetitive list against something pretty competitive, I had fun with it. I played for the objectives. I played the game as best I could, and when it all came down to it, I said, right, if I lose, I lose. Let's make it fun. Let's have a narrative. My force commander, or my company commander for the Dark Angels, just charged right into the Archon with a 2-up invuln save. Killed it. He one-shotted him. Okay, he failed his first 2-up roll, because he has to roll them 1 at a time, and he failed it. And then he was chopping through Incubi and stuff, and obviously he got shot to pieces, but the story was there, and it was really fun because of it. So obviously those 2 steps. Step 1 is to really be immersive. Step 2 is to have fun with the game. Excuse me. Your opponent might not like playing against fluffy stuff. You might not like playing against competitive stuff, but don't let that ruin it for you. And step 3, try and encourage fluffy games. Try and encourage your opponents to try it. Write a narrative campaign. Do a map campaign. You can get people involved in like a couple, slow grows or sequential battles. So you say, do you want to play 2 games? The first one will play 500 points. The winner gets an extra 250, and then we'll play a second game. Stuff like that. Make it sequential. Now, whilst your hardcore tournament players and those who are super focused on balance won't enjoy that so much, you'll be able to find those people who do enjoy the fluffy games, and from there you'll be able to have more and more of these super fun, immersive games. So that's going to be it really from me. I know I've rambled on maybe a little bit too long, but it's something I'm quite passionate about because I am very pro fluffy gaming and not anti-competitive. I am pro-competitive. If that's what you want to do, that's great, you should do it. But I feel that people who enjoy fluffy games, they don't get many out there, and a lot of people are like, oh well, what's the point in bringing? And okay, here's a little story just to end it. A little story time from Callum. I went into Games Workshop, and it's so rare that I buy a model from Games Workshop, but I went in on my way back from uni about 8-9 months ago, and I was like, oh, I kind of fancy getting something for my guys. I'll have a mosey around, and I was like, do you know what I really want for my Space Marines? Honor Guard. Okay, now these guys are expensive, 2-up save, no invulnerable. They die just like a regular Space Marine, but they got some attacks and they look super cool. And they go with the Chapter Master, and I think that is awesome. So, walk in, I'm like, the Honor Guard you only get with Manius Calgar, it's like 40 quid. Screw that. I'll get some Vanguard Veterans. So I go in, I pay for these. He's like, oh, what are you going to do with these? And I say, oh, I'm building out some Honor Guard because I think they're really cool. And he laughed. The Games Workshop store owner literally laughed at me because I was getting Honor Guard, and I was like, oh, why are you laughing? He's like, because they're useless. Why would you ever take Honor Guard? And it was just like a smack in the face in terms of a realization I had, in the sense that I was just like, does it matter? Do they have to be hyper competitive for me to want to build and paint them at the very least? And why is it that the way that it's portrayed by a lot of store owners, not every single one of them, but a few, why is it that it has to be good to be used? So I was just like, and ironically enough, they have been so crap, except for one game where they hacked through a whole bunch of Blood Angels. They have been terrible. They have died before they get into combat. I've even got them a Land Raider, and they get out, they die to Overwatch, they don't make their charge, and then they get shot to pieces. But for that like 1 in 25 of the time, when they go in and they wreck face, it's the most fun I have playing the game. So there you go. Moral of the story, A, if you want to win, don't buy Honor Guard, and B, doesn't matter what anyone else says, you collect the models you want to collect, you play the games you want to play, and try and find people who enjoy playing those games with you, because it's not necessarily easy, but it's going to make the world of difference as to how much you enjoy your games. So thank you ever so much for watching. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, leave those comments below. Tell me some of your interesting stories. If you are more fluff based, explain why. Try and let's spread the fluffiness everywhere. So thank you ever so much for watching. It's been me, Karen from Tabletop Banter. Don't forget, have fun.